Hi, I want to welcome everyone as you're logging on. We'll take just a couple of minutes and let other people log on too. So welcome. Good evening. If you're just logging on to Jewish Voices, I want to welcome you. We're going to just take a minute or two more and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to log on. Hi, I want to welcome everyone to Jewish Voices. If you have just logged on, we're going to wait 1 or 2 more minutes to make sure everyone else has the opportunity. Thank you. I see some people are already contributing to the chat, so by all means, if you want to say hello to one of the readers, please do post a message in the chat. That's really sweet. Sometimes the chat in these events are so great. I've always wanted to figure out a way to preserve them. Lovely messages coming in. Thank you. If you're just logging on, we're going to give it 1 more minute and then we will begin tonight's program. Thank you. All right, I think we're going to begin. I want to welcome everyone. My name is Judy Margles. I'm the director at the Oregon Jewish Museum and Center for Holocaust Education. It's really my great pleasure to welcome you this evening. It is the 21st year that we have been offering Jewish Voices. By far, it's our longest running program. I'm so grateful that the pandemic has not gotten in the way of us being able to offer it again this year. This evening, we have 5 talented authors who are going to be reading to you. These are writers who span a range of genres, including fiction, poetry, nonfiction, and essays, and who are so generously giving their time to share their work. Now more than ever, we need to support the arts in every way that we can. In years when we've gathered at the museum, our authors have been able to sell their books. Should you wish to purchase a book, and we certainly hope that you do, this year we're asking you to contact the author either through email or their website. And as each person is reading, we're going to be posting their contact information in the chat. I am curious, there's a wonderful chat already going on, but if any of you have been at our event continuously for the last 21 years, could you let us know, please? Just put a message in the chat. We'd love to see that. So tonight's event is actually one of many on the museum's calendar. I'll just give you just a quick upshot of what's coming. This Thursday at noon, we're offering a program called What is Moral Leadership? On November 11th, a program with Susan Nyman, director of the Einstein Institute in Berlin. She's going to be talking about her newest book, Learning from the Germans, Race and the Memory of Evil. And on November 17th, From There to Here, Understanding White Nationalism. Details of all of these programs can be found on our website. All of our virtual programming including tonight's event, are offered without charge. We'd be grateful for any donation that you might be able to make to help us meet our costs. Jewish Voices owes its 21-year-old history to Willa Schneberg, who has skillfully organized Oregon Jewish Voices since its inception. And for this, we owe her our deep and heartfelt thanks. An event cannot run for over 2 decades without having witnessed some unusual challenges and points in our history that are worth calling out. But I don't think anything compares, of course, to this year. We've endured impeachment, the pandemic, unprecedented movement for racial justice, a confounding administration, job losses, economic hardship, and yet, as always, the possibilities for renewal and hope. I take my solace from writers like each of those who will be reading this evening, who have the finesse and articulation to help us wade through difficult times. So while you won't hear us clapping, please know my and the audience's appreciation in advance. The format for this evening event will be as follows. I'm just going to briefly introduce each author, who will read for approximately 10 minutes. We should have time at the end of the program for your questions, so please go ahead and put questions, not in the chat if you wouldn't mind, but in the Q&A. Our first reader this evening is Jacob Boas. Jacob was born in transit camp Westerbork in the Netherlands and has lived in Portland since 1996. He's the author of Boulevard de Misère, The Story of Transit Camp Westerbork, We Are Witnesses, 5 Diaries of Teenagers Who Died in the Holocaust, Writer's Block, The Paris Anti-Fascist Congress of 1935, and Cultural Criticism in the Netherlands, 1933 to 1940, the newspaper columns of Menno ter Braak. Jacob Boas has taught history at Portland Community College and Linfield College in McMinnville. Please join me in welcoming Jacob.
All right. Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay. My reading tonight is Street of Horrors, part of a work in progress called Name and Address. That is an investigation of my personal and family connection with the events that overtook us in German-occupied Holland during World War II. Street of Horrors. In the late 1940s and 50s, my mother often took me to visit her cousin, Alida Barmhartigheid, Tante or Aunt Ali to me. Alida made her home on the 4th floor of a boarding house, Beethoven Street 16, in a fashionable part of Amsterdam, sharing a single room with her little doggy Donnie, whose aura had been captured in several photographs enshrined in filigreed silver frames. Alida, whose last name, Barmhartigheid, means compassion or merciful, had been experimented upon in Auschwitz, never married, no children. As one of the very few surviving members of our once upon a time extended family, Alida would come to our Friday evenings to partake of the Sabbath light, that is, short on a religion, none, long on edibles, the proverbial chicken soup, chicken parts and potatoes fried in butter, sweetened green beans subjected to merciless boiling, rounded off with a banana or orange, to say nothing about the coffee and pastry on the sumptuous Sabbath flowchart that made their appearance approximately an hour later. Around 9:30, the bell would ring, announcing the arrival of Gerard, Alida's companion, who would stay just long enough to exchange a few pleasantries before escorting Alida back to the boarding house. Impeccably dressed in suit and tie, in rainy weather, he'd show up in a long raincoat and 2 umbrellas, one for himself and one for Alida. I thought of them as a couple, though Gerard was quite a bit older and not Jewish. I don't recall him ever joining us on those Friday evening get-togethers. I was reminded of those visits when I finally got around to reading a book I purchased in Amsterdam in 2017, Beethoven Street, Hidden Histories. Had I known that one of the book's hidden histories showcased Alida and her sister Anna, I would not have waited 2 years before cracking its spine. And now I also understood why, speaking of the war years, a prominent Dutch writer once referred to Beethoven Street as the Street of Horrors, quote unquote. The book's 5th chapter, Liberation and Cleansing, dealt with the crimes and punishment of former members of the Dutch National Socialist Movement, NSB for short. One of the first arrests was that of physician and Amsterdam alderman Johan Strack, Beethoven Street 154. A public health official, Strack's duties included examining the racial credentials of women with hearts set on marrying into the German SS. A notorious anti-Semite, Strack had been known to sprint down 3 flights of stairs to stop deliveries at Jewish homes, and not a few Jews owed their dispatch to the killing fields in Poland to the physician's unwavering commitment in making Holland Judenrein, cleanse of Jews, quote unquote. A self-styled maven in sniffing out the Aryan nemesis, the physician's vaunted expertise was solicited to decide the fate of a foundling left on the doorstep of a non-Jewish couple in the hope of saving their little boy's life. The presumptive parents had no idea where the child in a knit sweater and hat had come from, and duly reported his presence to the police. When an investigation and newspaper ad came up short, the couple registered the boy as Remy van Duinwijk. Remy, after the protagonist of a children's book about an orphan child who hooks up with an elderly roving street musician, 3 dogs, and a monkey. Duinwijk, after the name of the street on which Remy, quote unquote, had been left for adoption. Soon thereafter, the police informed Remy's newly minted parents that they would have to take the child to Heinrich Himmler's security service around the corner from the Beethoven Street. Assuming the child was Jewish and pending further investigation, Remy was transferred to a Jews-only holding pen masquerading as a round-the-clock childcare center. Eyewitnesses recall that everyone at the children's center was crazy about the little guy with the deep blue eyes, including, it seems, the chief of the euphemistically named Central Office for Jewish Immigration, SS Hauptsturmführer Ferdinand aus der Funten, and that a number of his underlings, no doubt emboldened by the boss's example, actually hoisted the little fellow up in the air and actually caught him on the way down. A German guard surprised Remy with a teddy bear. Yet in the end, Remy's very popularity proved his undoing, as he could not be smuggled out of the center without jeopardizing the network in place, spiriting children out of harm's way. Enter SS physician and Amsterdam alderman Johan Strack. Wasting little time, Strack determined that the little boy was not circumcised. The depth of Remy's blue eyes left him cold. It was Remy's ears that gave him pause. Jewish, he pronounced. Remy was murdered in Camp Sobibor on the 21st of May, 1943, 1 year and 3 months. Having ruled that Strack had decided Remy's Jewishness on medically unsustainable grounds, the 1947 tribunal, charged with investigating the role of Dutch Nazis, sentenced the former alderman to a 6-year prison term with credit for time served in pretrial custody. Another Dutch Nazi standard bearer was milkman Joost Westland at Beethoven Street 11. Westland told the tribunal that he had never harmed anyone. He had joined Holland's National Socialist movement, he said, in the expectation that the party would improve life for the middle-class folk like himself, and that he'd supplied Jewish customers who were about to be arrested with groceries such as butter, cheese, or cake, all of it free of charge. Joost Westland's neighbor, the florist Walters, seconded the milkman's story. I know that he was a very good person who helped everyone. Be that as it may, membership in the Dutch Nazi Party in itself was enough to earn the milkman a decade-long suspension of the right to vote, a lifelong ban on running for public office, exclusion from military service, and similar restrictions of a civic nature, the standard punishment meted out to those who had no blemishes on their record other than party membership. Comparable is the case of Eugenius Gerardus Schmidt, Beethoven Street 16. The 51-year-old Schmidt was arrested in May 1945 and interned at a detention center for former NSB cohorts. Like the milkman, Schmidt contended he had done nothing wrong. A detective who interviewed former residents of the boarding house found that Schmidt had joined Holland's National Socialist movement on a whim, having allowed himself to be swept up with the enthusiasm of one of the residents. The detective further found that Schmidt had never donned an NSB uniform, quit the movement in 1941, and sheltered students at risk of being drafted for labor service in Germany. Other witnesses testified that Schmidt was one of 56 Beethoven Street residents forced to witness the execution of 29 men in German custody in reprisal for the liquidation of Nazi security officer Herbert Oehlenschläger, Beethoven Street 89, responsible for hundreds of deaths in the Dutch resistance. Intercepting Oehlenschläger on the way to his office, 3 men got out of a car and overpowered the scrawny SS man, leaving the prized Nazi operative bleeding to death from a shot in the head in front of the cigar shop at Beethoven Street 6. A vigorous protest against Schmidt's arrest and internment came from an unlikely quarter, Alida Barmhartigheid and her sister Anna. These sisters Schmidt had supplied with false identity cards, money, and found a place to hide after their escape from Westerbork, a transit camp from which the bulk of Holland's Jews were sent to their death. Schmidt was released from detention in October 1945. It was not until the spring of 1947, however, that the case against the former Nazi sympathizer was effectively closed, albeit with the same restrictions mentioned earlier. This, of course, was the same Gerard, or Gerardus, whose last name was indeed Schmidt, who used to call for Alida at our house and turned out to be the owner of the boarding house at Beethoven Street 16, whose steep stairs led to Alida's modest retreat on the 4th floor. The Friday evening meals came to an end after we moved to Canada in 1957. I last saw Alida somewhere in the early 1980s. I can't recall where we met, but it wasn't a boarding house. Gerard died in 1979, Alida in 1986. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. That was really wonderful. Can everyone hear me? Oh, good. Thank you so much. Our next reader this evening is Sheri Levine. Sheri is a poet, artist, and teacher living in Portland. She is the recipient of the Lois Cranston Memorial Poetry Prize, was awarded the Poet's First Prize from the Oregon Poetry Association in 2017. Her poetry and other writings have appeared in literary magazines, including Calyx, the Timberline Review, Poet Lore, the Jewish Literary Journal, and Mizmor Anthology. She founded and hosts Head for the Hills, a monthly poetry series and open mic located at the Hillsdale Library, which is now taking place on Zoom. Her first book, In These Voices, was published in 2018 by Poetry Box. Please welcome Sheri Levine.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, start whenever.
Okay. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Judy and Willa, for hosting this event. It is certainly an honor. And I want to thank my friends and family from all over for coming to this reading tonight. This has been an extremely difficult year. When the pandemic hit, it was at the same time that I found out that my mother had terminal cancer. I couldn't even think about the pandemic. I didn't even feel the mask on my face. All I could do was be near her and make her feel comfortable. My mother passed away 3 days after Mother's Day. I felt so lucky I could be in the same room with her when she passed away. I'm happy to share these poems with you. When my mom turned 80, I wanted to take her swimming, but she didn't have a bathing suit. So I dragged her to a really fancy swim shop downtown, and this was our experience. Swimming in the rain. With my hands on her still strong shoulders, I steer my mother to the discount rack so she won't complain about the prices. The sales girl comes over wearing an Oregon Ducks t-shirt, her smartphone squeezed into the back pocket of her rhinestone jeans. Cracking her gum, she asks my mother in slow motion, "Can I help you?" My mother is slow as rain, a creaky, twisted bicycle chain. Back at the car, she lifts the black bathing suit and folds it neatly on her lap. "I look like a fat seal in that thing," she says. And I tell her, "And I'm a seagull crashing into the surf." It's been raining now for hours, both of us swimming in uncharted waters. So during COVID, when my mother was in hospice, I could only communicate with her through a window. This is called Through the Window. "Mom, I'm almost finished. Your bills are paid, clothes sorted, books piled in boxes. I keep finding things. A birth certificate stuffed between your art prints, your father's death certificate, the place and date when you married, how much I weighed at my birth. I've been finding 20s in your drawers, unopened checks in your mail. I just found your diamond rings in the front pocket of your new suitcase. Hairballs under the bed, dust in the white shag carpet, dates scribbled down, newspaper articles clipped. I took a walk today and found a lilac bush, like the one outside my window when I was little, the one growing next to the tree with the bird's nest. Do you remember, Mom? Purple petals in my fingers, I cupped them to my face. Like a bouquet, I wish I could carry that smell over to your window today. Would you be able to smell them? Smell is one of those things to go when you are dying, the hospice nurse said. Soon I will enter your room, crawl into your arms. We can swim into the ocean in the sparkling waves, our backs arched, somersaulting, tugging the tide, then letting go. So my mom was a painter. These are some of her paintings. And she loved to paint flowers, and she loved lilacs. Today, I don't have to be kind. I don't have to return your phone calls. Shower, comb my hair. When you ask, yes, she is still dying. In a quiet room, blanketed by light, a bouquet of lilacs droop next to a bruised banana, a glass of mango juice, vanilla ice cream dripping from a spoon. Smell, I gently tousle petals to her nose. She shakes her head, turns away. Her breath, now slow and strained, each kiss a whisper, a tiny puff of air. Eyes glassy and blue-green stare at my nose. How did you get that bump on your face? Her knotted fingers peruse its shape. I lift the mouth to kiss and kiss the part of her face I hope she can still feel. I stroke her moist hair. I am here, Mom. I am here. Unleashed. Since my mother died, I haven't been able to read. The words on the page blur like a child blowing ink through a straw. The image, a black splotch with branches of tiny arms, hands, and feet. My mother used to teach me art on our back porch. A can of turpentine, scattered tubes of thick paint, dirty rags, brushes in a pickle jar. Open window, a curtain shift, a clothesline of pinned white cotton sheets. I used to watch her tanned tennis arms press and pull the iron along our damp clothes. Steam sounded like a sighing dog waiting to be unleashed. One of my mom's favorite artists was Chagall, Marc Chagall, and one of mine favorite too. And we always talked about going to Israel to see his wonderful stained glass windows. This is called Birthday Gift for Chagall, after Chagall. Above the kissing couple hovering over the smoker's table, the dog dreaming on the rug, the simmering pot of mushroom barley soup, above the radio's crackling static, the neighbor's high-pitched clarinet, Madam singing libretto, her emerald gown fading in the closet, above steam rising from the radiator, metal pipes banging, mother's iron hissing on her damp underwear, her trilling tongue rolled up like a sausage bun. Above birdless heaven, the town emptied of row houses, churches, herds of lazy cows. The lonely cloud moves along air as dust. Below, moon glow casts shafts of light on two lovers who toss birds and flowers into the sky. So I'd like to close this reading with this last poem, Astral Body. Before my mother woke up, before scrambled eggs and mandel bread, before Soul Train boogied on the TV, before cats fought with chickens on the fire escape, before the dirty diesel wafted from streets below, before Count Basie and Ellington, Mr. Cavalari's whiskers fell into the sink, before a slap on the wrist or on the behind, before clouds shrouded the sky, turning everything into permanent gray, when white stripes broke the blue skies in twos or fours. Soon my mother would shout from the shower, "Get to the kitchen now." I would drag my chair close to the stove and count 29 bubbles of her poly coffee pot. I was mesmerized by the starburst design on its front, how its silver rays cast light into the sky, my astral body rising like steam. Thank you.
Sheri, thank you so much. It's wonderful. Our next reader is Willa Schneberg, who probably needs no introduction to any of you, but nonetheless, I will introduce her. Willa is a poet, essayist, visual artist, curator, and psychotherapist in private practice. Willa has authored 5 poetry collections, including In the Margins of the World, for which she received the Oregon Book Award, and her latest volume, Rending the Garment. It's definitely worth mentioning again that Willa has organized Jewish voices for the past 2 decades plus, and we look forward to our continued association with her on this program. Willa has also guided a literary arts readers seminar entitled Literature of Modern and Contemporary Jewish American Women Writers, and her just completed poetry manuscript, The Naked Room, is looking for a publisher. So if there are any publishers out there, we're going to put her contact info in the chat. Please welcome Willa. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here and to be Zooming. This is one incarnation we have never had yet. And what I found out right before we began is that 193 people registered for this event. And as you know, you can listen to it any time after it's over. And so for us, this is amazing because this is about 3 times as much as we've ever had in our event space at different locations of the museum. I want to thank OJM, CHC, and Director Judy Margles for choosing to have the 21st annual reading of Oregon Jewish Writers on Zoom. It could have not happened, so I'm so delighted. And we can open it to people from all over the US and abroad. I have a cousin who lives in Patagonia, who I know is Zooming in, and some Israeli friends. I want to thank Becca Biggs and Deborah Jane for getting the word out, and also Zoom Master Amber Curson for making this event possible. I was concerned at first that we would not have enough attendees a week away from Election Day, but I've been more than pleasantly surprised. I will read 2 poems from my recently finished manuscript, as Judy mentioned, The Naked Room. Somebody says, yes, I'm here to hear you. Oh, I thought it said in the chat, I can't hear you. I will read 2 poems from The Naked Room, a true synthesis of my life as a psychotherapist, not one exempt from angst, and my life as a poet. The first poem is entitled Skin. A Black woman loans me her skin. It doesn't fit like a body stocking or a wet suit. It becomes mine, sepia and smooth. I notice a puncture on the left side of my torso. There is blood. My thumb fits in the slit and finds muscle. The band-aids are the wrong color and too small. I must do something. Smash the leg irons, shoot the master, cut down the lynching tree. Now the woman is in the hallway wearing her skin. She says, "Don't worry yourself. You got your own." Inked numbers, yellow star, always there. This wound is mine. The next poem is entitled Tiny Monuments. And this poem has actually been made into a song by Molly Meyer. I won't sing the song, I'll just be reading the poem. So a little background. Oregon State Hospital is the custodian of the cremated remains of approximately 3,500 people who died between 1914 and the 1970s while living at Oregon State Hospital and other Oregon hospitals and at Oregon State Penitentiary. They are now housed in a special memorial next to the Oregon State Hospital Museum. And for those of you that are not in Oregon, that's located in Salem, which is the capital of Oregon. Tiny monuments. The epigraph is for David Mizell, who photographed the canisters holding the ashes of mental patients at Oregon State Hospital. When human beings were still locked away, for sadness clinging like a marine layer, voices saying how awful they are, going fetal when cars backfire or corks pop. They were housed at the Oregon State Insane Asylum, and when they ceased to be, they were cremated. If no one claimed a brother, a daughter, or a father, the ashes were kept in numbered copper canisters on pine shelves in an underground vault. Not infrequently, the water table rose, giving the forgotten contained in corroded quarters homes uniquely their own, coated with efflorescence and mineral dazzle, where an alchemy of copper and water bloomed and burst into color. These tiny monuments to the scorned and unknown, where patinas of pink, burnt sienna, ochre, aqua, and if you look closely, you will find moon craters, archipelagos, frozen waterfalls, big dippers, and dunes with lone tracks. The next poem is from my collection, Storytelling in Cambodia, and it's a prose poem, and this will be my last poem. From 1992 to 1993, I worked for the United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia. First as a district electoral supervisor setting up registration sites in Phnom Penh, and then as a medical liaison officer, providing counseling and arranging repatriation for UN volunteers from member countries. I thought it was appropriate to read about the ballots when we only have a week away from this enormous election. Absentee ballot, Mongkol 1 registration site, November 5th, 1992. The musicians are not here today to distract you by practicing on brass nippled containers housed in semicircles inside the room next to the registration site. To get away from election talk, you must walk past the young cripple who crawls every day on his gnarled legs to the benches to unfurl his book of color postcards of the life of the Buddha. Past the old woman vendor who will sell you one cigarette. Past a still young girl hawking plums stoked in sugar and rice wine, to your spot behind the shacks of the Donchi, and Donchi is Khmer for Buddhist nuns, where you will squat, your underpants around your knees for a quiet pee. The sun is sticking to your body. You want to speak English directly, not through an interpreter. You are exhausted from bawling out the Ghanaian civ pole, that's short for civilian police, international police, who sat on his ass instead of helping to transfer a bunch of Buddhist nuns who stood in their saffron robes against our white sheet backdrop, giving us the honor of photographing them for their voter ID cards. You are tired of pretending to be the authority on democracy when you believe all governments stink. Some just smell more rank than others. As you sing the praises of the secret ballot, you pray that no one will step on newly laid landmines walking to polling sites. You have to make sure that the laminator that you have to make sure that the registrars know not to let the laminator overheat and to roll the fleshy part of the thumb firmly over the ink pad to catch the whirls. You have to play by the rules and allow the Khmer elder who came all the way from Canada to exercise his right to vote, but not his wife, because although she is Cambodian, she was raised in Kampuchea Krum, a chunk of Cambodia bitten off by Vietnam before she was born. You have to learn to deal with the obnoxious party agents who try to exclude the Vietnamese from registering because they blame the Yuans, which is a derogatory term for Vietnamese, for destroying the country, but excuse the Khmer Rouge as merely the black sheep of the family. As you slowly pull up your underpants, you remember the absentee ballot in your pocket that you received too late to clink your 2 cents into the election box back home, where you felt your vote was a message in a bottle, never found. Although I was helping Cambodians to vote in their first free and fair election since the French colonial period, I didn't get my own absentee ballot in time to vote for Bill Clinton. I wasn't sure then that my vote mattered. He didn't need me to get elected. This election is quite different. Every vote counts. Thank you.
Thank you, Willa. Indeed, every vote does count. There. Oh, there's my video. Sorry, we're getting there with the technology. Willa, thank you so much. Our next reader is Betsy Fogelman Tighe. Betsy has published poetry in literary magazines, including Tri-Quarterly, which was nominated for a Pushcart Prize, and in Rattle. Her full-length manuscript was a semi-finalist for the Snake Nation Press Violet Reed Haas Poetry Prize and the Hidden Rivers Willow Run Book Award. Betsy's essay about her mentorship with James Wright appeared in the spring 2018 issue of the Georgia Review. She is the teacher librarian at Roosevelt High School and has raised 2 fine young adults. Please welcome Betsy Fogelman Tighe.
Hi, all. Do I need to start speaking to see me, or I'm not going to see me?
You're good to go.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here, and I thank Willa for inviting me and the Oregon Jewish Museum for hosting. I moved to Portland about 12 years ago, partly because of what I saw as the vital Jewish community, and now I feel that I'm really a part of it. So thanks for having me. The first poem I'm going to read, I'm also delighted to tell you, was selected this past summer by Ilya Kaminsky, a great Jewish Russian American poet, as a finalist for the prize from Georgia Review. It's called The St. Petersburg, Florida Cigar Factory Employs a Reader, which I think is self-explanatory. I do like to think that the owners may have been Jews. And it did, it crossed countries from Cuba to the States. This was a Cuban tradition. In the hot belly of the factory, bent over my box of tobacco leaves, stacked and supple, fattening beneath my strong fingers, plump as the palms that swayed by the sea where we would swim on Sunday, El Lector, gifted with a drum-rung voice, rang in the news. Perched on the tall stool in his white suit and Panama hat, filling us with tales, bearing us the new world as we worked to make it rich. Presentando, song of myself, and the Belle Dame sans merci. Shakespeare's sonnets, the English a weapon with which I would win a wife, a woman proud to have a man who could roll off a word or more to secure her surrender, roses and candy, inferior tricks for wooing, less potent than the word's elixir, which seated the garden where I would live with her. The Scarlet Letter and Walden. El Lector shook all our hands before he started, and when the sun was no longer high in the windows, as we packed away the layers of leaves and pushed our chairs under, we thanked him, singing a song or two that had carried us across the roiling waters, lullabies for him to present to his daughters. And the next poem, called The Chinese Girl Speaks, is forthcoming in the Evening Street Review. When the classroom is noisy, I feel like a shell underwater, sucked back and forth by the tide, chipping a bit on something rougher. I leave the house in dark, my father breathing softly in his half-sleep. I can hardly remember the color of the carpet in the light or how my mother looks laughing, her left hand covering her teeth. I wonder why always the left. In the evening, I walk to the garment factory, and bent over my machine, I think of the movies I've watched and the songs in them. I sing them low to myself in my clipped accent. I want to go to a college where steam will billow from my mouth as I talk to handsome seniors lounging against huge elms, bragging about the programs they've written on their IBM computers. I want to look like the teacher with her sweater pushed up at the sleeves and the collar open. She is tall and kind. Sometimes she talks so fast I am only half sure of what she is saying, but I nod yes and won't volunteer the answer to a difficult question. When the black boy sitting next to me looks over, I swell like the throat of a frog before it chatters. Tonight, I will go home, brew tea, and wash out my jersey. Tomorrow, when one of them speaks to me, I will not look down, but straight back, an American. And that is a really old poem that I wrote when I was teaching in New York City and had many, many Chinese students. If you couldn't tell who the teacher was, tall and kind. And this poem was selected in 2015 by the dueling judges for the Oregon Poetry Association prize. It was the first prize winner that year. It's called War Makes Cannibals of Us All. I did try to pick poems that either had something to do with being Jewish or were somehow about my conscience and witness. The 1947 school book unveiled a story, a pilot downed on desolate Takashima, his prospects hopeless. Besides the cold and barrenness, the ruined craft, and injury, his leg, thus immobility. No lights, no fire, no food. Sounds of scurrying spiders and Komodo dragons sharpening their teeth against the rock. The first day, hysteria. The fourth, resignation. On the seventh, he drew from his pocket the sharp knife, lifted his issued shirt, stroked his tender belly, which growled as his dog would if it watched. He made a thin slice, turned up the skin, sawed off a sliver of subcutaneous fat, and ate. A few days later, again, he unbound his belly, mapping it further with the road to survival, sewing his life by the thin thread of his own flesh to the mountain rock, to the dark that descended, to the stars that rose without a word, and the sun that turned by no command. Did swallowing turn his stomach? It turned his chances. Years later, he confessed that even in the comfort of his white picket fence life, fed daily by the aproned wife, he struggled with a craving perverse, dense as an old tree, to cut again, to taste, to know what he was from the inside out, then in again. Can someone tell me what time I started? Okay.
I think you started about 7 minutes ago.
7:10?
Maybe 7, I don't know.
About 7 minutes.
Okay. I'll cut one. On the path through the woods. To say I had no fear, to say that I did not wish at every turn to pivot and run back to my mother, as she was the year she dined weekly with her obese suitor in her silver sequin dress, one hand gripping her nightly shot of scotch and the other the cigarette in its long black holder, would be a falsity. But still, I pressed on, murmuring as my mantra the familiar dialectic, would I rather be happy or good? For I'd been taught by the witch on the corner that it was not possible to be both, because goodness requires we always put the other first, handing over where to rest and where to work and the thin leather reins to the horse of sexual pleasure. I'd set off solo on this path of the mitzvot, not made of red nor yellow brick, but white porcelain, fire glazed with orange and pink, and though I could not read its alphabet, I'd seen its shapes, sometimes in clouds and cliffs, and I followed their direction to the north, as I would the star, trailing the ghosts of my people, dropping the stems and stone pits of the fruits and vegetables I pilfered from their yards, who'd built their homes along the path, good folk who never took a nickel too much and returned the merchandise they'd mistakenly carted off in the nooks of their shopping carts. I trusted I could find my way back through the debris of my wrongdoing to make right my wrongs, sweeping to one side or the other the remains of my mistakes, to kiss my fingers, to graze the mezuzah on the mantle, and re-enter the house with new purpose. On each of the past switchbacks, some to the right of self-delusion and some to the left of outright cruelty, some a little north of poverty and some south of gluttony, I found a crumpled note. Where to feel in and feel me sway near, and light candles and illumine the night. And though they may have been for the masses, I took them just for me, gathering and stashing in my hat the lightness of their demand settling on my sweaty head. I tried to understand the loftiness of each, and knew that if only I could heed, I'd be free, and if free, also right, good, and happy. And then I will finish with this short poem called Derivation, which you'll see alludes to a couple of things in the poem. You relate to me that joy is, for the most part, fronted with a little juice. Let's not, for our part, forget the dark. We need it for the light to edge in. Thank you so much. Oh, and thank you for all of you who came. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Part of the problem with Zoom is we can't see each other's faces, but thank you for making us smile, Betsy. I think it feels good to smile. Our final reader for the evening is Leslie Watt. Leslie is a Nebula Award-winning writer and Oregon Book Award finalist in fiction. Leslie's work has appeared in a number of anthologies and journals, including Beyond Lament, Poets of the World Bearing Witness to the Holocaust, Best New Horror, Lilith, Parabola, Fugue, Midstream, The Los Angeles Review, Unstuck, and Calyx. Leslie's mother was a survivor of the Riga ghetto. Please join me in welcoming Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone who is now missing the National League Championship Series Game 4 to attend. And thank you, Willa, Judy, for organizing the reading, and OJMCHE for hosting. My mother was a Holocaust survivor, and she always said to us that you got to take the good with the bad. So in the spirit of seeking joy amidst turmoil, here's a short story that I hope does both. It's called Crash. 2 months ago, a vintage sky wagon plunged through fog to land on Elm Street, where we live. The Cessna tunneled through our hallway and only stopped when its nose met the concrete post on the back patio. Ralph and I own a one-story ranch. A long hallway connects living to sleeping quarters. I should say we owned a ranch. It's kind of more of a duplex now. The plain belly melted the carpet, and we needed new rugs since the 90s anyway, so this could be our chance. There's just enough room to pass each other notes across the top of the fuselage. If we were a little younger, we'd move. I live starboard in the living room. I have my own guest bath and, of course, the kitchen. Ralph's on port side with garage, utility, and bedrooms. He likes sitting in the Cessna, in the pilot seat. He likes turning all the knobs. Ralph does laundry while I watch TV and fall asleep on the couch. Kind of role reversal. The pilot, though, is the nicest young man. Poor Jed was just 7 hours shy of instrument rating. He still feels terrible, but I tell him these things happen. I was making breakfast at the time, and Ralph was in the bathroom reading catalogs. It makes me shudder. What if I'd been in the hallway putting laundry in the linen closet? Could have been front page news instead of section B, human interest. Poor pilot Jed broke his nose. Our magnolia lost its bloom and probably won't come back. But our house, oh, our house. Guess I should say our duplex. It looks like a plane crashed into it, which it did. The insurance guy says we're lucky we still have a roof over our heads in this recession. On cold nights, Ralph climbs up into the cockpit to look through the plexiglass window while I light the fire. We take turns reading our People magazine, except when the double issue comes. It's too thick to pass over the Cessna top. I don't give him that one. Overall, it's not a bad arrangement. Pilot Jed's trying to make it up to us. He's been insulating our walls and patching the ceiling and replacing the sprinkler heads, something Ralph's been promising to do for years. Yesterday, Jed pounded out the dents in the tail and pried up and recycled all the metal scrap from the backyard. For years, I've been keeping quiet about the neighbor's dead rhododendron, but she can't stop complaining about our Cessna, hypocrite. Today, Jed stopped off at Jerry's to pick up spline so he could repair the screen door. Having an airplane crash into your house is the last thing you'd expect to happen in Oregon, a state that is famous for starting with an O. After the newspaper went digital and Ralph retired from the press room, he was home 24/7. A little too much togetherness, if you know what I mean. Learn to grow tomatoes, I said. Take up fishing. Well, he sent away for fishing catalogs, fish porn, I call it, filled with glossy photos of lean, flexible poles and delicate, long-legged flies. Men get excited about such things, and who am I to say it's wrong? Oh, what did Ralph go and do next? Ordered a matching fishing pole, his and hers waders. If it weren't for that airplane crash, he'd expect me to be up at 5 fishing the Mackenzie River, as if fresh trout was what we needed to spice things up. Well, I'm sorry, but this doesn't impress me when a man ties his own flies. Ralph just never learned to be independent like I did when the kids left home. When he's ready for lunch, Ralph boards the Cessna and knocks on the cockpit window to get my attention. I reheat the meatloaf and canned beans and set a tray on the front porch for him. He'll bring back the dishes before nap. It's practically the same routine as ever, except there's a Cessna in the middle of it. Pilot Jed thanks me for each and every homemade meal. Last night I made lemon meringue pie, Jed's favorite. In this weather, the meringue tastes better when it sets overnight. Ralph will eat a frozen banquet pie as quick as a fresh one, so he can wait till supper for his. Mail comes around too, a daily stack of rubber-banded magazines and bills. I sort. Bills go into Ralph's pile. Good housekeeping stays on the table, except one catalog catches my eye. Famous Pilots Institute, endorsed by Ernest Borgnine, guaranteed to get you flying within 30 days. But it's not a catalog. It's an instruction manual. I bang on the plexiglass and Ralph jumps up and dashes to my side. Mail's here, I growl and press the pilot's manual against the window. I give him a look that's probably distorted by the plexiglass. I should be happy Ralph's found a hobby that doesn't involve waiters or me, but Ralph says, "Oh, that was fast." He looks like he's been caught with his finger in the pie. He presses both hands against the window. He needs a haircut. "Miss you," he says, his eyes shiny as a catalog photo. I stand on my step stool and set his mail atop the Cessna. I use a pokey stick to push it over to his side. The doorbell rings. Pilot Jed. This is not the best time, I say. He sits while I stuff an uneven triangle of pie into some Tupperware and add a stick-on label to remind him to bring it back. Shoo him away. Famous Pilots Institute. Is Ralph daft? After everything that's happened, he's enrolling in flight school? Who's he trying to impress? Macho old fool. What am I supposed to do if his plane crashes? What am I supposed to do? Bake your own damn pie, I scream so loud the fuselage practically rattles. I'd strangle him if I could reach around that Cessna and grab his sorry wrinkled neck. Ralph gives me sad puppy dog eyes, which do not work on me because that Cocker Spaniel we owned was his dog. Never had a lick for me, always sat on his lap, even when I saved half my steak for him. Ralph heads out of the Cessna. He turns to stare at me and he looks so sad I know it'd be kind to cut him some slack, but I won't do it. And he does not bother saying a thing because we've been married long enough. He knows when he's gone too far, and he has gone too far. And he knows that anything he says now can and will be used against him because we've been married long enough. He knows that anything he says can only make things worse. Thank you. And thank you to Jerry, Sheri, Willa, Betsy for reading to us. Be well, be kind, eat chocolate, vote.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the readers this evening. I know for me, just being transported this hour, just not having to think about the world swirling around us was such a relief. We do have a little bit of time for questions. There is a couple of questions. If you have a question you want to ask of any of the readers, please do put it in the chat. There's one question directed for Jacob. Jacob, just a question about your family background, whether or not your family, did your family come from Holland, or were you from Germany? Did you come to Holland after the war began?
No, we have been Dutch for, my father is probably 16th century from Spain, 15th century Spain, Portugal. My mother's, they were Dutch as Dutch can be, lived there hundreds of years. So, yeah. We've been there forever, so to speak, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And a question I'd like to ask of all of you is, how has your writing changed since the pandemic? Do you feel that you're writing differently? Writers need solitude. So has the pandemic changed what solitude means to you? If anybody just wants to chime in or chat with each other, I'd be so grateful for any insights. You'll just have to unmute if you want to say something. Don't be shy.
So as I said in my intro, my mom passed away at the same time the pandemic hit. So
yeah.
It's like I wasn't even really aware of what was happening around me, And as a writer, a pandemic is perfect for a writer because we just stay inside and write. So that was one positive thing. Yeah.
I would say, I'm still working, and you could imagine with, even though I'm seeing psychotherapy clients virtually, it's a heavy time for folks, so I feel like, the therapy language is called parallel process. I have my own angst about what's going on, and then I feel like I take home their angst with me too. And And because the way I work is kind of in themes, and so the manuscript that I just finished is not just about, my life as a therapist, but also the history, as you heard one of those poems about Oregon State Hospital, the history of mental health and, what's changed, some of the dangerous cures like lobotomies that we once thought were effective. So I find for me that in a way, because I work in themes, keeps me writing because I know what I want to write. But I have friends who are totally writing work about the pandemic and about how it's affecting them and our sense of being enclosed. But I wouldn't say that that's necessarily my way. But I know a lot of folks, their writing has changed dramatically.
Thank you, Willa. There is a question, Sherri, about your mother's paintings. Is there any, I think a lot of people are very intrigued by what they saw. Is there a place where they can be seen?
Well, I just put about 200 paintings in storage, but I plan on having a show when the COVID is over, whenever that happens.
Beautiful.
But
And what was your mother's name?
Her name was Kay Levine.
Kay Levine. Great. Maybe just one final question. Someone is just really, and I hope you'll all contribute perhaps, but what is the importance of Jewish writing at this time? When you think of it, maybe I'll just add to that, when you think of yourselves as writers, is the word Jewish sort of sitting on your shoulder? It doesn't really frame your writing. So really two different questions, I guess, if anybody wants to.
I mean, I'll just say I feel like even if my stories don't, or essays don't specifically address my Jewish being, they're all influenced by everything that I've lived through, which is a Jewish life and, having parents with unique circumstances. And lately, I've been trying to write more humor because it's extremely easy for me to go to the dark side. And I don't want to, I think those stories are important too, but I need to protect my own emotion and not try to write them right now. So I'm working a lot with humor and I have the big book of Jewish humor. That's what it's about.
To respond, I have written a lot about Holocaust and materials related to it, but I've also found times that I had to get away, and so two of the books that you mentioned are not Holocaust. But right now, approaching 77, I'm working on something, and this is part of it, what I read, that's also more designated for my children and grandchildren, because they know very little about our past. We don't go back, we go back a long time, but because of the war, we don't go back very far.
Sure.
So that is sort of inspiring me at this point to write up that history, of which what I read is one part, So, and part of it is because I, last year when I was in the Netherlands, I came across my old school, which was in the heart of the Jewish Center, former Jewish Center, Amsterdam, and I came across a list of names, 200 kids who went to my school, of course, before me, who were murdered, and I got the list, and I did a lot of work on trying to reconstruct some of their lives from what I could find out about these kids. So, yeah, at this point, it's sort of, the thing I need to do. Yeah.
Anybody else?
I would just say, if we're talking about really this moment, the past 6 months, pandemic, Black Lives Matter, the upcoming elections, I do feel that whether or not we're conscious of it, we carry the obligation to repair the world and to do charitable works. And I'm not saying we're different from other people, but we have acute moral compasses.
Thank you.
I think that you know, as Jews, part of what I'm aware of is like the poem I read, Skin, you know, to be aware of my own privilege as a white person who is Jewish, and to know that I think the whole idea of being aware of trying to stop oppression of all sorts, but also this particular time is coming more into my writing, my sense of not only being part of an oppressed minority, but also of my privilege. And I think that that's very important to address right now.
Thank you. I think we will draw the evening to a close. I want to thank all of you for sharing your wisdom, your eloquence with us. Special thanks to Willa for organizing the event, as always, and choosing such fine writers. A shout out to Amber Curson, who handled all the tech things. We will say goodnight. Just a reminder, though, you will be receiving an email with the recording and the contact information for all our fabulous writers. And I do urge you to be in touch with them and purchase their books. So on that note, thank you very much. Go and vote if you haven't already. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.